Hello and welcome to Imminent Domains, conversations at the crossroads of art, ecology, and the body. This is an expansion of Imminent Domains, Reckoning with the Anthropocene, an essay collection by myself, Alessandra Nacarado. And today, my guest is Jillian Christmas. Jillian Christmas is a queer Afro-Caribbean writer, artist, educator, curator, and consultant. The longtime spoken word curator of the Vancouver Writers Fest, the former artistic director of Versus Festival of Words. She is the author of the acclaimed poetry collection, The Gospel of Breaking, and the children's book, The Magic Shell. Jillian is the recipient of numerous awards and recognitions, including the 2021 Sherry D. Wilson Golden Beret Award and the 2021 Dan Ogilvy Prize for LGBTQ2S+ emerging writers from the Writers' Trust of Canada. She has performed and facilitated workshops across North America and lives on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people, so-called Vancouver, BC. Welcome, Jillian.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
It,
So nice to have the bio read back to me every so often. Keeps me honest.
it's wonderful to have you here and just to, begin by naming a little bit of the incredible experience that you bring to the
Mm,
table and the recognitions of your work that have happened, because it's really important work in the world that
thank
I've
you.
had the chance to just deeply appreciate and witness for almost 15 years now. It's really a total pleasure to get to
Yeah,
talk to you today.
it really is. I was kind of reflecting when we were doing some prep in the days coming up to this, um, and reading some of domains and remembering some timelines that converged in different parts of Turtle Island and places we've been together. And yeah, it was pretty magical to take that little memory lane. So thank you. Thanks for including me on the journey.
What a journey it's been. Um, Speaking of that, I just as we're getting started, want to take some moments to locate myself and really give some thought to this place where I am, this beautiful place. I'm in Takaranto, Toronto, which is where I was born, where I grew up, where I've returned to. And this is a meeting place of many nations, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Mississaugas of the Credit. It's land that's covered by a number of treaties as well, including the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty. And that's an agreement to share and protect the land that, Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and newcomers have all been invited into in this spirit of peace and friendship and respect. As I understand it, this is the case. And so really as I walk this landscape, as I sit with these waters and trees where I grew up, and as I come to this microphone, as I join you today, I'm really thinking about how I can show up for these communities of animals, these communities of trees, these communities of people that so graciously hold me within a lineage of settler colonialism that I'm part of as a settler, as a white person, and how moments, how conversations might bring me into a depth of relationship, a depth of feeling, a depth of kinship that can be towards a good way, a gooder a way. So, there's always a prayer in me that the conversation we have today may be in a direction of relationship with all that is, with that big cycle of things. And just want to speak that into being as I show up here looking at the window at the beautiful trees and knowing there's water beneath me nourishing me as well. Yeah.
Thank you for setting that, like, preparing the table so beautifully. Um, yeah, I am here on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people, but as you know, I did a lot of my growing on the territories of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat and Mississaugas of New Credit and more. And um, yeah, I think, the intention that you set around relationship building is such an important one. And it seems really appropriate. I know that my knowledge of relationship and connection to the land has been influenced by our relationship. I think about many of the moments that we've shared that have really centered around the land, camping together on Salt Spring and sleeping on Shell Beach with the uh, under the sort of magic of the moon and the meteors and the phosphorescence in the water. Um, yeah, and I think how lucky maybe how meaningful it is to have that awareness to return to the land, to respect the land, to honor the land, to listen, and to be willing to learn and remember. To have that as like an intrinsic rhythm in our relationship and also in um, our relationships with self as well, because I feel that I have grown immensely and understood so much more by building that relationship with the lands that I am privileged enough to be moving across. Yeah, it's hard to sort of articulate how much I've learned from these particular territories, but yeah, when I look out my window at the two sisters, and I, think of all the medicines that I have received from this land, um, spiritual and physical medicines that have held me. Yeah, I can't imagine my experience of the last 15 years being anything like it has been without that deepening relationship. So, yeah, I also want to add to that intention that the words that we speak and the lenses that we bring to this conversation might um, offer respect, might move in alignment, um, and might pay homage to the lineage of teachers, the stewards of these lands, and those who are fighting, like, really with their bodies and their energy and their spirits to keep what still exists. Mm-hmm. Thank you for having me here to talk about all of this.
Oh, what a great and deep and profound gift to have you here.
Mm.
And really to get to choose in doing this podcast to cultivate interviews that are close and intimate and with some of the people who I have had the most profound conversations with of my life. And really, truly, some of the conversations you and I have had in the past have really redirected my life and shifted how I understand this world and my place in it. So it's special to come home to that and to choose to come together in this way and share some of that care and intimacy with others for whatever emerges in this moment. And um, where I thought we would begin, now that we've sort of begun first with where we are and with this land and water, which I think is always where we begin. But I would love, if we could get to know you a bit more. And I had this opportunity to really sit with not only your books, but some of the other interviews and conversations you've had and given recently, and wanted to bring some of what you've said into focus. And one of the quotes that I wanted to draw up was, "I refuse to separate myself from myself. One of the harms of the white gaze or colonialism is that it asks us to show up as one facet of ourselves. And also, part of my work in healing myself, healing my family line, and undoing all of that harm that has happened is in being myself fully, naming all of these aspects of myself and naming them as joyful and as healing." And so as we begin our time together, I'd love to just open up the space and really invite you to introduce yourself to us in whatever way feels full of you and real and natural and most meaningful in this moment, whether that's song, story, just telling us about yourself.
Thank you for that wide invitation. I love that. Um, yeah, I I'm really glad to have this opportunity to introduce myself in this context because, well, I mean, I feel like it's not just me. It's been a very full month and a little while. And I feel like I have grown to know myself differently and better, even in the span of those like 30 days. So, yeah, there's a lot of new information in that introduction that I'm sort of sifting through myself. But I think I want to start by saying I'm an artist.
Mm.
Of course, I, like all of us, I'm an artist, a writer, yes, and a poet primarily, and also at times a weaver, a lover of food, a flower painter, and adornment enthusiast. I'm an auntie, and that feels very high on the list of things that I want to be remembered for. Um, I am somebody who lives with disability and a lens of madness. And my understanding of both of those is ever expanding into new language. I will say that I just had an appointment I've been waiting for nearly a year, and I learned some new diagnoses that I had been sort of curious about. And so, yeah, my experience of being in my body feels really interesting now, right in this moment, because I am reflecting on a lifetime of experience, of embodied experience, or even sometimes disembodied and dissociated experience that I am now sort of recontextualizing. And yeah, and so I guess I find myself in this moment sort of reintroducing myself, uh, both to me and to those around me who I love and who love me, and um, yeah, and who will also know me better. And I think that's a good place to stop for right now. That feels uh, like it includes a lot of the things that make me me. And I guess one other thing that I'll add is that I am somebody who asks. That feels really important to me. And actually, it feels really rooted in my identity. And so, um, yeah, question making, understanding, um, seeking, uh, and joy creation are some of my greatest tasks, I think, in this life, my greatest practices. And um, I think I would love to also maybe introduce my body uh, with a short poem, if that's okay. A home I can only leave once. Tell me, what is a body of thought, of work, politic, practice? How many vessels gather together around one soul, and what is each holding? And how will we know them to call them by their names? If I open the skin of myself, an invitation, you may wonder if this water ever be made land. You may desire to question if there is container enough for both of us, savior enough for any. But what is a body of pleasure, collective knowledge, delight, in motion? How will we know it unless we go searching through the roughness of being alive? And where do we go to find it? At rest, resistance, breaking? How far will I travel? Which machine can carry bones through time and river blood across continents, beneath seas? And what is a body with disease? And who is family enough to hold it, heal it? Are you one, dear friend, dear reader, a body that would gather next to mine, erase the line for a moment so that urgent truth can be born on new lips? Could you learn a body imperfect and gorgeous as this? Come closer, dear heart. I want to know your rhythm and you mine.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jillian. That was deeply moving. I feel really honored to hear that poem and to hear a introduction that is also a reminder that we are always in motion. Who we are in this planet is this moving thing. It's not a fixed point, and how we arrive to ourselves, how we arrive to each other is ever changing. And this question of who will hold us, who can hold us in our multiplicities and our complexities in the rise and fall of our bodies into these new territories of illness and pain and love and pleasure. There's so much present in that poem and in that sharing that I feel like I both got to witness and was witnessed by, which is often my experience of your poetry and why I'm so deeply moved by it. And in your sharing and in that poem, I was really reminded of this, choice to call this podcast Conversations at the Crossroads. And it's the crossroads of where art and ecology and the body meet, but also this moment in time as a crossroads of emergency, of, crisis. And personally, I do see the crossroads as this spiritually potent place. And as you were speaking, as I was tuning into this moment that we're meeting at and what you were sharing and where I'm personally at, and you're saying the past 30 days for a lot of people, like, okay, what is it to meet each other at this crossroads, at this time, this potent moment that we choose today is the time for us to have this conversation. It would be different on any other day. This is the crossroads we meet at. And what does this crossroads have to tell us? And so I just think of that like potent spiritual like work in my tradition and so many traditions of like who meets us at that crossroads, what helpers, what aids, and like how do we show up? Who do we call to? How do we show up for each other? So I just wanted to speak that into this moment.
Thank you for speaking it because it's so powerful. You know, I think the reality that I have experienced, and I think maybe just the math of it is that we don't always get to be meeting each other in these portals, Um, our timing is our own, and we get lucky when it's divine, and we get to line up these really major inflection points. And yeah, it does feel like so much of what is shifting internally is mirrored and maybe directed even by the external world that that we exist in, and the one that we've created for ourselves. So yeah, knowing how to find our people, knowing how to hold our people and uh, hold ourselves, and discerning, um, I guess, the permeation of those boundaries has become a skill that I'm honing for sure, for certain. Because as I know, community, um, moving through community with all of our multitudes, and the seeming randomness of when certain things present in our lives, or presently in our minds or in our bodies or in our spirits. Yeah, it makes sense that there are many moments where the alignment is not possible. So I definitely count these ones as sacred when it does unfold like this. So yeah,
Yeah,
happy to be here.
beautiful. It comes to mind these like practices of the rituals we do for moments like these, and some traditions of working with the goddess Hecate, for example, who is like the guardian of the crossroads. And anytime you would come to a road that forks three ways, you might speak her name or say thanks to her or leave a little offering there. And there's these certain traditions really all over the world where we um, remember to say thanks or be attentive to or recognize the paths within and the paths without, and that there is great significance and worthiness to giving weight to these moments where we stand at a fork in the road, where our life can move in multiple directions, and that when we are there, we can often feel incredibly alone. But we are not alone because, if nothing else, we stand on a path on the earth. And we are so held by this earth, by the elements of it, by the deep, damp earth, by the air, by the sun, by the pollen. And for me, that's really where ritual, where practice helps me step into relationship and responsibility to myself and to this world. And I was reminded of a lot of that just as I heard you introduce yourself. It brought to mind these whole practices. And I know it also reminded me, brought to mind a few other things I was thinking of as we came here. And one of them was a quote that you had shared about your writing process and wayfinding your stories and putting together your first book. And it's this quote: "The home that I have is in my body." And then with that is this question of ritual. And I know that ritual has been taking on a stronger and stronger role in your creative practice. And I think that came in strongly as you were writing this book as well. And I'm curious, because it's what's coming through me right now, if you would speak to those two things in relationship somehow, if that sparks for you.
The ritual practices and the coming home to oneself. Oh gosh, they feel intrinsically connected to me. They feel like the question and the answer. I work a lot with ritual, and it has been certainly sort of it has become more and more a part of my life over the last 5 years, I would say. But when I think about myself and I think about myself as a child, ritual was a part of my practice even then. And I have always loved ritual. I've always loved ceremony. Um, I've said it's one of the only things that I miss about the Catholic Church or about religion, really as a whole, is this attention to ceremony and to ritual. Now, I don't know if I always felt that the rituals I was given or the ones that were imposed on me were ones of questioning, ones that were allowed to be questioned, ones that were allowed to be examined or co-created with, you know? And so that really has been a passion in my work. and sort of a compass for me in finding myself and carving myself out of, whatever mist I have found myself in. I I know that ritual is not just about um, repetition. I know that it is not just about um, belonging, although that is an important piece. Um, and I know that what I have discovered in ritual is an anchor to myself, a map to myself, a way to reorient myself when I feel untethered. And sometimes that is something I can offer myself in solitude. And sometimes it's something that absolutely requires community and friendship and femship and family of all kinds. Yeah, when I think about my return to ritual and my reclamation of ritual, uh, there's a very important piece that sort of comes to the surface for me. And I want to tell you about it, but I want to sort of offer you some of the picture, some of the scene. So, as you know, one of the experiences that has shaped me over the last several years is coming to an understanding and also uh, moving through receiving treatment for and support for severe PTSD. And uh, this particular time for me was an absolute disconnection from myself, a saturation of self doubt that was so pervasive and impermeable that I was absolutely lost to myself and to most people who could recognize me. Um, I was in an excruciating amount of pain, um, which, I think self doubt can produce. Um, all of the medicines that I had collected over my life for the ailments of depression or anxiety or were not functioning to help me. And um, I turned for the first time in my life to uh, pharmaceutical meds, which for 7 million reasons was not accessible to me previously. And unfortunately, the first introduction I had to that was extremely traumatic because uh, most folks know that um, testing out psych meds can be challenging and traumatic, but um, testing them out and finding the worst one for you can definitely, at the edge of sanity, can do the rest for you, can definitely complete the job. And so I remember looking in the mirror and not seeing myself, uh, you know, in such a way that I was terrified. I think I had felt the edges of that in my life before, but at this point, I didn't know the path back. I didn't know. the trick or the person to ask, or um, really, I had tapped out all of the resources. And this was also um, 2021, 22, which, as you know, the whole world was exhausted and tapped out, and support and network was not really the most reliable thing in that time, the most available. But I found myself in my apartment. I mean, I wasn't leaving my apartment at all. LOL. I found myself in my apartment. And I was lucky enough to be with a friend who had come to visit, and by chance had come during this moment of uh, absolute crisis. And uh, they were there the day that I really lost myself, lost my mind. They were there the day that uh, The Care We Dream of, the book that Zena Sharman edited so beautifully, uh, came in the mail, and my piece Seed was one of the first pieces in the book. And I was devastated because I could not remember the person who had written that piece. I felt really disoriented. And my friend, Nasra, who I think won't mind me sharing their name, because the magic that they offered and the love that they offered was so unique to them, and their abilities. But they read to me from that piece my words back to myself. Um, and it was so painful. It was so hard. And both of us were sobbing, and they just held me like, like held my whole body like I was a baby. And they anointed my head with oil, and they let me shake and panic and scream and cry and leave my body safely because they were there to watch over me. And it was so uncomfortable to be seen in that moment. It was so uncomfortable to um, be in the presence of my own wisdom in a moment where I couldn't understand what it meant, or how to get back to it. It was so meaningful to be witnessed, to have space held in a way I had never experienced before. Um, and it reminded me that one of the practices that I have always had as a writer, as an artist, has been to recite my work to myself. Um, I think that is something that began for me quite young, in what maybe I was conceiving of as editing at the time, or even as memorization, or as um, just finding understanding in my own voice, but it became a practice. And I often found it sort of embarrassing. I wouldn't tell people that I read my own work so frequently, because it seems a little like self-centered, which is not actually the it's not actually the insult people have been making it out to be all these years. But yeah, I remembered that it was a lesson also given to me by Zacchaeus, dear friend, who held so many of his poems in his body. And yeah, and I just remembered these moments of rediscovering myself through my own words, or even for the first time. Like, I don't know if you remember the same experience as a child writing, but like reading your own work years later, and being like, what, who told me that? Like, it, like the knowledge that was there that I didn't even understand was there at the time, um, you know, that to me feels so much um like the root of remembering, that like knowledge that comes to us through generations, through our body, through medicines that we didn't even know we could touch, through song and like collective vibration, all of that. Yeah, there was a lot of knowing in the writing that I wrote as a child. And yeah, and I came to discover that there was a lot of knowing in the writing that I wrote as an adult. And everything that was compiled in this book. And so I make it a practice now to read my writing, a conscious one, an intentional one, um, whenever I feel even the least bit forgetful, you know? I read one of my poems to myself, and it helps me remember. It helps me put myself back together. And um, yeah, so many of the rituals that I have in my life are centered around remembering, are centered around spending time with myself, spending time with my ancestors, spending time with the land, spending time with the things that I know, because we are all so forgetful. Um, and I don't throw shade on forgetfulness. Sometimes forgetfulness is a blessing, but I do think that remembrance is also a medicine. And I feel really grateful to have people in my life who have been witness, who I have had the opportunity to witness, um, where we have nurtured each other for a long time, and we can recognize each other even through the madness, even through the brokenness, even through the world. Ritual to me really feels like a gift we can give ourselves. And I find that artists, we are so lucky because we create this, we create these paths back to ourselves just by writing, just by making. And then when we forget, we get to see ourselves again, you know? And even more powerful, we get to see ourselves in the different versions that we've been, because we don't have to stay static. We get to see the information we had before through a new lens. And even if we're very lucky, we get to see ourselves through the eyes of others, and like how they have experienced the work that we've created and the love that we've created. And yeah, it is, that is, I think, a miracle in the non-religious sense. um One last thing that I'll just touch on is that um there's a poem in the book. It's called No One of Us Alone, and it talks about, it's a very short poem, but it talks about um well, it starts with the line, the good thing about death. And it's a contentious line even in my own mind, but what it concludes is that the good thing that happens when we lose someone, or when we move through one of these portals, um, is that we are offered sometimes an opportunity to not just process alone, but to have the reflections of so many, of community, to have the stories that come out at ceremony, at funerals, at rituals, that let us make the big puzzle into a picture, that allow us to see a human like through the kaleidoscope, like all of the parts that we've been allowed to witness can come together, and we can get new moments, new experience, new lessons from people that no longer walk with us in the physical sense. So Yeah, I think um, ritual has cared for me in so many ways, and I am committed. I am Rituals Bay.
Wow, thank you for that deep and wide sharing. I'm so deeply moved, and so many pieces of that feel so deeply connected and true. And I feel like you gave word and story to things I've experienced that are difficult to name. And I imagine that will be true for other people. So it's a real gift. And one of my teachers once described I was in a moment of really profound grief and transition, and I put myself into a 30-day spell, a 30-day working of real big magic. And what he said to me was, I wonder what spots you left for yourself in the future. Like, I wonder what chords you were sending to your future self as like these future anchors to hold yourself for what was to come. And I was like, is that a thing we do? And he was like, yeah. And I think what I just heard you articulate is it's also a thing we do as writers. And that makes so much complete sense to me. And the beauty of witnessing and being witnessed by each other and by ourselves, and that this is part of the alchemy and part of the work that we're doing is really truly profound. And as I was putting together these questions, as I was like feeling into contemplating what we talk about today, Zacchaeus Jackson's name kept coming up on my heart. So just having his name spoken felt really meaningful too. Just this piece of how our writing can save us, can truly save our life, change our life, make worlds and break worlds and make them again. And I mean, I saw Zacchaeus not only say poetry saved my life, but show so many people how it could save theirs too.
Yeah, I'd love to um, add to that because, well, you know, Zacchaeus forever is laughing in my ear. um, and offering me so many reminders of joy, of ritual, of friendship, of welcoming. I told a story recently about the Canada Day reclamation, I guess I'll call it. Zacchaeus often invited all of the poets and strangers and friends into his tiny apartment on Commercial Drive to cook us a major feast on Canada Day. And, we know what Canada Day is, but I think about how powerful it is to reclaim, change, transmute, transform uh, wounds by calling family together, by setting the table. Um, and yeah, that has certainly been one of my medicines, both the serving and also more recently the receiving. I have been in deep practice of. Um, and yeah, and Zacchaeus certainly laid some very important ground for me to do that work. So I'm always grateful. His birthday just passed, and certainly like every day thinking about, but really feeling his presence. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Um, there's a few reasons why, I mean, he's often on my mind. And also, I had been thinking about how we build homes and how we build family, particularly as queer folk or as folks who've gone through a lot of like loss and trauma. And so definitely the way you've built family, the way we've built family comes to mind.
Can I speak to that for just a quick second? I just was thinking about, um, even the language of family, and how potent it is, um, in talking about queerness. I I think that the thing that feels so important right now about that language is that, um, family exists whether or not it is spoken or understood as such. There are, um, people who we are connected to without ever even knowing their names. And in queerness, because of the multitudes of harm and persecution that exist, there are many of us who don't get to self actualize, who don't get to step into, the fullness of themselves, and who have to leave a lot of parts of themselves out of the greater knowing. So I just want to, in this moment, speak to all of the family, known and unknown, and, all of the family who are still discovering themselves, um, who may never speak the words of queerness or take on the labels of, um, the many identities that we live in, but who are felt and honored and believed and welcome all the same.
Oh, thank you for naming that. Yeah. It can be hard to know what to say sometimes. And then maybe the answer is like basically a prayer. It's like what we can't say with our minds needs to be said with our hearts. And I do think that's really true often. And when it comes to these questions in particular, and this is the time of year when seasons are changing and when migration patterns are shifting and when geese are taking flight overhead. And there is, of course, Mary Oliver's gorgeous poem ringing in my ears, which feels like this perfect line for us in our conversation. You know, you do not need to be good. You do not need to crawl on your knees for 100 miles repenting. You just need to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Meanwhile, the wild geese go on. And those geese, I mean, Mary Oliver, what a incredible queer, right? Who gets it? doesn't that poem, doesn't that quote, which I might have mixed up.
Forever. No, you did a great job. And yes, forever and ever, forever. Yeah, I mean, I could say more about that, but I might go on and
What I
on.
guess where I'm going with that is that poem and thinking about family and these family structures and migration and memory. Part of what I felt really called for us to touch base on today is in connection with this essay in the book called Flock Memory that really circles around Canada geese, much maligned Canada geese that people really don't like. People really like have it out for Canada geese, and I get it. They're like look like they might destroy you. They don't really get out of your way.
They have teeth.
They have teeth. They're kind of scary, but really they're just deeply protective. And this is something I've known for a while. It's something I kind of found out more. And these geese are acting that way. They're like attacking us because we are near their nests. And they are these creatures that mate for life. They are flocks that always take care of one another, right? And the way geese migrate is in a V for two reasons. One is that it's the easiest way for them to fly because they create this uplift for the geese behind them. It makes it easier for them to fly, and they change places so they can rest and lead and rest. It's this organic formation. But it's also so they can see one another. It's so that no one gets left behind and no one gets left alone. And if someone's lost or injured, other geese will follow them and land together. And this kind of care, this kind of family structure, this kind of way of being together, I feel like has so much to offer and has something to offer us in this moment. You know, in the book, it's where I turn to kind of make sense of the ways I navigated substance use as a child and found my way out of that. And I'm just speaking a little Mary Oliver, a little Canada geese family structure into it to see what it has to offer us in this moment as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that speaking into collective collective knowledge, collective wellness, and that image of being able to see everybody, being able to see the whole network. Yeah, I was reading through your essay again and remembering so many good things that were held inside of it. It was this essay that reminded me of the piece "No One of Us Alone," that collective knowledge that requires the whole. It requires the whole. Otherwise, there are necessary missing pieces. And yeah, you said in the essay they carry memory between them as a flock, and that I thought was so incredible. And yeah, that is the point and the voice of that poem, "No One of Us Alone," is to say that yeah, we carry this together. And um, I think that that is maybe rare wisdom these days, or perhaps it feels out of reach for so many, hard to articulate or to even conceive of a functioning and a thriving unit where everybody is seen and where all of the needs are valid and all of the resources are possible. Um, yeah, I mean, when I was reading this, I was picturing the geese, which I know and remember fondly from my many years in Ontario, and we do get them here as well. But I also thought of the crows immediately because they are such a I won't demean them by saying mascot, but they are such a yeah, you know, symbol maybe of Vancouver. Um, they are also a really strong like icon in many First Nations stories and medicines and humors, um, and um, and yet they are considered a nuisance by many, despite their incredible generational knowledge, their incredible facial recognition, which I'm like, facial recognition skill, like if that's not seeing everybody, I don't know what is. Okay. I need that skill. I have the worst facial recognition. I'm so impressed by crows and the gifts that they leave. And yeah, my partner, one of my partners, feeds the crows and walks them up and down the block, and often, to the dismay of some neighbors or possibly, folks who haven't yet acquainted themselves maybe with the magic of those particular birds. But the thing that is sort of iconic about the crows here in Vancouver is that their migration is daily. They move, from one end of the city across and past and beyond, and they roost together every night, and then they do it again in the morning. And so it's called the Crow Highway here. When you can look up into the sky and see thousands moving in one direction. And what a powerful thing to see every day, you know, to see that um, intention is not the right word, to see that um, practice in, you know, in our everyday lives, but like that reminder being so realized, even in the ways that we obfuscate or mystify or misunderstand our relationship to each other. The birds have figured something out. There's uh, so much fascination in writing and poetry, especially around murmuration. And I myself have meditated on that practice of birds, of flocks who move together with such exacting sort of rhythmic dance in the sky. It's kind of hard to imagine the information that they would need to be able to navigate so delicately around each other and with common purpose. And I have heard, and I can't cite my sources because I'm a poet. Sorry, it's been a long time since I picked up this anecdote, but I have heard that it's a vote. They have a means of communication that is essentially a kind of vote. And so once sort of like 51% of them have sort of tipped in one direction, that has confirmed that that's where they're moving and they will move. But it happens so quickly and their registering of it happens so quickly. And I'm sure that there are muscle memories and generational memories that play into it as well. But um, that idea of democratic choice that is still honoring the movement and the togetherness of the whole is, yeah, it's a wisdom that humans need to meditate on. Um, yeah, as much as possible.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that reminder that they do have this daily migration, and it is really amazing to every day go through witnessing that which like leaves and chooses to return, and leaves and chooses to return. And the crows in Vancouver and East Van are such a delightful thing to be in relationship with. And the way the geese migrate here is such a longer arc, of seasons. And there are so many ways of tuning ourselves to these patterns and cycles and rhythms that I think you were speaking to, like these rituals of remembrance, like the work of remembering. And I think it becomes this work of remembering our relationship, of remembering how we are tied to these migrations in our own way, to these cycles, becomes part of belonging, as you were saying, part of breaking these spells of isolation, breaking these spells of loneliness that really do break our hearts for good reason. Like, we are not meant to be left on our own. And the systems we are within are predicated on us being separated from each other because that's how they function best. Really, collectively, we are incredibly powerful, and separated, we are not as powerful because we are missing one of our most important resources, which is literally just our connection to each other. Um, and perhaps this is the work of artists, is to remind us that our connection to things like crows and geese can be that profound, that it can shift our awareness of our place in the cycle of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, geese, crows, the wind, nature in general, we forget that we are a part of it and that it is a part of us. And um, mhm. I heard the other day cite a source uncited, some YouTuber I was watching um, said animals, of which we are included, are born already knowing how to do the thing that they most need to do. So they said, you know, uh, wildcats perhaps are already onboarding sort of generational information around how to hunt. They play immediately so that they can practice that, and they are there are a number of these examples listed, but what this person mentioned was that humans are born knowing how to cry. And because our most important skill is to ask for help, because we are relational beings, we need to know that we must trust each other. Um, we must be interdependent. And we have to ask for help in order to survive, in order to build together. I don't want to focus only on survival because I think there's more for us here, but I thought that that was really powerful, that reminder that our most important skill is our ability to be connected and to seek out that connection. That it is the key to our continued existence. Um,
Yeah.
I I also was thinking about, we spoke a little bit earlier. Well, you were talking about the metronome, the sort of rhythm of migration. And I was thinking about time. Something that you wrote in here talked a little bit about deep time, the space between these geological ages, Anthropocene uh, included, and that slow millions of years time. And just now, when we sort of held up those migrations of the geese and the crows side by side, I had this thought that there are some migrations that require a lot of trust, um, because of the passage of that time, and the not knowing of, will the return happen. And I think that is also a lesson for us in community, that sometimes our orbits, our abilities to be in relationship with each other are changed. They're slower, they are longer, and require more patience, more tools, more adaptation. And yeah, one of the things that you and I have spoken about in the past, and that I feel so excited about, uh, especially on the other side of LOL. Who knows? That was just me saying a prayer to the universe. Please let it be the other side of PTSD. Fingers crossed. Um, but on the other side of the worst of my experience of PTSD, one of the gifts of the collective that was offered to me, to ponder, from my dear friend Jenna Reed, who works here in Vancouver at Kickstart Disability, and I think also works in disability community in Toronto as well. Jenna was reminding me of the concept of mad mapping. And I don't know that I had ever had it articulated to me before our conversations, but um, I think I did have some cellular knowing about it, you know, um, and I don't think that I had an understanding of that bigger picture, what it could be, the possibilities of it. But I certainly, I think somewhere, maybe even in my child mind, uh, wanted something of that depth and expansiveness. And when Jenna, remembered for me that that is possible, and that it not only is possible, that it exists and can be co-created, and has been a piece of cultural technology that has emerged from disability arts and disability justice communities. Um, wow, what a portal that was for me, and returning just to that image of portals again for a moment. I think I've also had this sort of paradigm shift about the portals that we move through, the migrations included, being that portals, moments of change, points of inflection, pain filled moments, crisis, all of this, it is such a powerful time because it is a moment of choice, where like a choice has to happen, something has to happen. And yeah, I think that there is a necessary piece in that long migration story that reminds us of choice and how important it is in the process, how important it is in the ritual, in the returning, and in the crafting of something that works for all of us, in the tipping of the wing. So all the birds can decide where they will be going together and how they will be going together. And yeah, and so Jenna laid out for me some of the ways that she has known mad mapping as it emerged, I think in the 90s from disability justice community and some of the functions of it. And uh, painted for me this possibility of a network that we choose, that we empower with the knowledge needed and the tools needed, and um, and that we activate around our own care collectively and individually. And so, and also just like the possibilities that are included within, like, I think a mad map can look like mine does currently, which is a Google Docs folder shared between my partners that holds, the numbers of all of my doctors and all of my meds and all of my emergency contacts, and also holds like um, some of the stories that come up in my head when I'm unwell and the things that can be so useful in diffusing them. It holds some of the comforts that people might not know to ask about or to offer in moments of crisis. But the ones that can be so powerful because they come from choice, because they are crafted outside of the structure of the systems that have created so much of the harm, um, because they are unique to us and thus not always knowable without the explicit naming of what they are. Um, you know, there's this idea around toxic monogamy that talks about sort of mind reading, this idea in typical relationship structures, heteronormative relationship structures, that um, people should just know what we need. They should just know how to love us. They should just know, how we are hurt and what our means toward understanding are. And the reality is that we are such complex beings alone, just us. And it's never just us because it's us plus all of the heritage, all the ancestry, all of the experience, all of the trauma. It's like a lot. And then like the perfect amount of a lot. And then on top of that, we build relationship, and not always do the individuals in a relationship know exactly for themselves what they need and how to find the peace that they're seeking or the healing that they're seeking. And so I think a beautiful ritual, a beautiful practice is to take the time to write those things, to make them known in some way. And maybe it's like a box, so maybe it's something tactile, maybe it's a quilt, maybe it's some way of telling the story of like how we get back to ourselves. Maybe it's a book of poetry, you know, but a a way of offering lovingly to each other and to those around us and to ourselves a bit of a trail of crumbs, you know, that says you can find me here, you know. You might have to look a little harder. And here's the map. And please come looking.
Ah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. And this, yeah, just different ways of mapping out what love and what madness and what connection and reconnection looks like. And what I appreciate about this time together in this larger conversation is like, we don't all have a lot of people in our lives, you know, queer folk. We may have lost a lot of our blood family, not, we don't always have access to, you know, people every day. And what other kinds of kinship, what other kinds of relationship are there that are there to hold us, there to be with us, that are there to love us really, even in our darkest hour, even our really these hard moments. And I think some of that is like the unseen world, and some of that is this like gorgeous water. You know, you're by that ocean. I'm in this city of buried creeks and so-called Lake Ontario. And the more I anchor into that respect and responsibility and just deep gratitude for this place, the more that spell of isolation can be broken. And the more I break it, even in those deeply, deeply hard moments of living with the brain and the body that I have, I can find a kind of compass towards home, you know, even as someone who does live with a lot of isolation. So just speaking that to those of us who maybe have to map out a way home to ourselves that doesn't involve a lot of people. What are these other ways? And I say that also thinking and believing that these stories we tell and the work many of us offer as poets, as storytellers, as writers, is a kind of companionship to other people walking those, standing at those crossroads, walking through kind of the underworld paths. And at least I hope mine can be. I hope to tell stories of that kind for that reason. And I have definitely found that kind of companionship in your work, this moments of both witnessing and feeling so deeply witnessed when I hear your work. And to that end, as we get towards the end of our time, there's one poem of yours. You know, I think it's been like 12 years, and every time I hear this poem, I cry, even when I like open your book of poetry and read it. For a poem to move me that deeply after 100 times is its own kind of incredible magic. And I do think it's the magic of feeling so witnessed in my own experience of the world, in this reminder that I am part of the cycle of things and a part of this world. And when I get to the crossroads, who is there with me? Not only the people that love me, but this earth that loves me, my ancestors who love me, this unseen world that poetry actually can speak to and speak from. So I would love it if you would read to us what's been keeping you up at night.
I would happily read that piece. Thank you for keeping it alive across the ages. You know, it's one of those pieces that feels truly like I was able to hold on to and maybe distill uh, like a wave that was moving through the universe. I just happened to be the one to sort of put my fingers on it and tug it down to earth. But it made me a conduit, and I'm grateful. Before I read it, I want to reflect sort of on, yeah, briefly on um, a quote that you had in the essay, the geese essay, Flock Memory. It was a quote by the doctor, I believe Dr. Gabor Mate, um, from, I believe it's from The Realm of Hungry Ghosts. But the quote is, not why the addiction, but why the pain, why the adaptation. And it had me thinking, because this new diagnosis that I received, and that shares a lot of symptoms and um, characteristics with an ailment that my cousin is also experiencing. This all comes full circle because I'm sitting here in front of, on my desk, a picture of a little version of me and my older cousin, who is also the first familial family of origin queer human that I had the honor of being opened up by. You know, like she taught me and continues to teach me so much about creating space for myself in the world, and also about remembering, about calling on old magic and the wisdom of our ancestors. And when we both received diagnosis within sort of hours, I think, of each other, um, I thought, huh, a genetic mutation that forces upon the continuously working, uh, the mandatory rest that is needed to do the work that we both do. And she laughed and said, "That's an interesting framing of it, and it matches our temperaments." But I thought, you know, is that a kind of technology from the ancestors? Is, you know, when I think of the question, why the pain, why the adaptation? When I think about you're talking about the geese and the changes, the choices that they make to change so that they can survive. Um, and when I think today about my body and about the changes, the mutations, the transmutations that happen inside of it, um, maybe not for ease, but for purpose, you know, that demands that I move slowly and with purpose, that demands that I rest, that I ask for help. All of that feels uh, at least like if not a cheeky joke from the ancestors, perhaps a magic spell or a command or a technology that I want to pay attention to. Um, and I would love to share this poem with you. Um, it reminds me often to reframe my pain, to look at it a million ways. Um, there is often little meaning to derive from pain, but I think that it can force us to draw our attention back to self. And so, with that meditation, what has been keeping you up at night? I do not need to tell you that you are enough. You already know that everything that you are is all that you need. Even though the weight of this world might sometimes bring you down to your knees, you must believe. The poet Rumi once said, "What do you know of your yet undiscovered beauty? One of these days you will rise from within yourself like a sun." So I offer you these words from my own heart, lips, and tongue. If you look around you and everything is burning, licked in flames upreaching like a funeral pyre, check if you are breathing. If you are, it stands to reason that perhaps you are not the kindling, you're the fire.
Every time. I have one last question for you. It's the same question I'm asking everyone who's joining me here. And that's to ask you, what do you think is possible? What world do you think is possible to exist between us?
I love this question so much, and I hope to ask it to myself many times, again and again. And today, my answer is everything, anything, but especially whatever we are committed to working toward, um, including that connectivity, including those deep resources of memory and interdependency, including a place where all of us get our needs met, where all parts of us get to be seen. I think that the world that I believe is possible is the one that we are willing to work for.
Yes, to that. And may we work together. I'm holding that prayer with you, that wish with you, that vision. Thank you so much for being here, for really offering just your heart, bringing spirit to this moment, and so much care. It means the world to me. And I know that this gift will carry on in meaningful ways to those who get to hear it.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a delight to talk to you. And, I'll probably call you next week so we can do it again just for like us.
Sounds
But
perfect.
yeah, I will just add one more intention before we close, and that is that the work that we do together, this work of ideating and dreaming, that all of the work that we do and that we task ourselves with is known to us to be a continuum, um, that we don't need to find the end of alone, and that it always, always, always contains rest and lots of cozy little nest spaces. Uh, as your and my connection has sort of codified, yeah, we get to make these little magic homes for each other, and I look forward to migrating together again soon.
It's perfect. Thank you so much, Jillian.